Have you ever imagined what could cause the total destruction of a city through fire and brimstone? Or what would lead Lot's daughters to decide to have children with their own father? Think about living in times when fire from the sky was God's way of responding to sin and injustice. Today, we will understand one of the most striking narratives of the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. This account goes beyond a simple ancient story. It teaches us about grave sins and their consequences, reflecting on their relevance for us in present times. In the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, situated in the rich plain of the Jordan, were not just important points on the map, but true symbols of wealth and prosperity. The marked difference between the dry desert and these cities full of life highlights the prosperity and beauty of Sodom and Gomorrah, both flourishing under divine protection and blessings. The book of Genesis describes that before Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, the land of Egypt was comparable to the garden of the Lord, highlighting how magnificent the area where these cities flourished was. This prosperity went beyond the simple fertility of the soil. It was also the result of the residents' ability to manage their resources well. The cities were notable for their wealth and luxury, competing in grandeur with the greatest cities of that time. It was a place where life overflowed in abundance, a true paradise on earth. Despite the appearance of luxury and well-being, Sodom and Gomorrah hid tensions and conflicts that would become evident as the story unfolded. These cities, known for their wealth, were located near the present-day Dead Sea, an area conducive to economic and cultural development. However, over time, this same prosperity gave way to a profound moral decay. The Bible describes the inhabitants of Sodom as very wicked and sinful, which foreshadows the dramatic events that were to come. Although God had endowed these cities with many resources, the moral deterioration of their residents complicated the relationship between prosperity and integrity. The Bible clearly reports that even with all this wealth, divine principles were being increasingly ignored, setting the stage for significant events. This is the moment when we realize the real consequences of moral decay and the vital importance of reflecting on the values that form the foundation of justice and holiness. These cities, once symbols of prosperity and wealth, were known for practices that scandalized both the people of that time and the faithful of all generations. The prophet Ezekiel clearly condemns the behavior of Sodom, highlighting, "Sodom and her daughters had pride, food in abundance and tranquility, but did not help the poor and needy." Ezekiel 16:49. This attitude of indifference and lack of justice would not go without divine punishment. The Bible points out that arrogance and lack of empathy were notable characteristics of Sodom and Gomorrah. The book of Jude echoes this sentiment, stating that these cities were destroyed by eternal fire, serving as a warning to those who indulge in corrupt desires. Jude 1:7. Among the most notable sins was pride, expressed both in ostentatious wealth and in the indifference of the residents. Gluttony and laziness were also common, as excessive wealth promoted an indulgent lifestyle, ignoring the needs of others. The inhabitants enjoyed their pleasures without considering the negative impact on those at a disadvantage. These sins together demonstrated a clear lack of empathy and justice, essential elements for maintaining a balanced and just society. Injustice was a concerning reality in the daily life of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible highlights how the lack of compassion and disregard for the needy were common practices in these cities, as Ezekiel mentions. They did not extend a hand to the afflicted and the needy. This disinterest in justice and solidarity created a scenario conducive to sin flourishing freely, paving the way for a rigorous divine judgment. As we explore the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, it becomes clear how deeply corruption had taken root in these cities. The violation of divine laws and the absence of repentance led to an inevitable outcome. The judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the most intense and significant narratives in the Bible, illustrating how God responds to uncontrolled sin. The story begins with angels sent by God to assess the situation in the cities. In the book of Genesis, we discover that two angels visited Sodom at dusk and were received by Lot, who welcomed them with great hospitality despite the risks involved. Genesis 19:1. Lot, who is Abraham's nephew and the son of Haran, Abraham's brother, was raised by his uncle after his father's death. Abraham, known for his faith and loyalty to God, cared for Lot, and they developed a collaborative relationship essential in their adventures. The Bible describes Lot as a man of integrity who would face difficult choices and great challenges. As he and Abraham grew wealthy with lands and herds, the available space became insufficient for both, leading to an amicable separation. Abraham, showing generosity and faith in God, let Lot choose first which land he wanted. Lot, attracted by the fertility of the areas near the Jordan River, chose to settle in the plain that included Sodom and Gomorrah, cities notorious for their prosperity but also for immorality and sins. When Lot moved to Sodom, he quickly became more than just a resident. He assumed a leadership role, sitting at the city gate, a sign of his influential and respected position. However, being so close to the city's vices and injustice presented great spiritual and moral challenges for him. Lot's life in Sodom was marked by a growing conflict between material prosperity and moral decay. His presence in the city could not stop the widespread corruption and, on the contrary, left him in a critical situation, urgently needing divine intervention. This was one of the reasons why God chose Lot to host the two angels who arrived in Sodom. The presence of these messengers triggered a chain of events that would culminate in divine judgment. Tension escalated when the residents of Sodom surrounded Lot's house, demanding that the visitors be handed over to have relations with them, as recorded in Genesis 19:5. This violent request reflected the city's deep moral corruption. In a desperate act to protect the angels, Lot even offered his own daughters, revealing the extent to which his morality was being challenged. However, the angels acted and blinded the aggressors to prevent them from carrying out their plans. Then they warned Lot about the destruction that God planned for Sodom and Gomorrah and instructed him to flee with his family. In a gesture of compassion, the angels advised Lot, "Run for your life, do not look back, and do not stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains to avoid being destroyed." Genesis 19:17. This urgent instruction to flee and the prohibition against looking back demonstrate the gravity of the situation and the critical importance of escaping the imminent divine punishment. After the angels warned about the impending danger, Lot hesitated to leave the city. As described in Genesis 19:16, but Lot lingered, showing that he did not immediately follow the angel's instructions, possibly due to the difficulty of leaving everything he knew behind or not fully understanding the seriousness of the situation. Noticing his hesitation, the angels intervened directly, taking Lot, his wife, and his daughters by force and bringing them out of the city, according to the biblical account. This act of intervention highlights divine mercy and care to ensure the safety of Lot and his family, despite his initial reluctance. While Lot and his daughters obeyed the instructions and went to the city of Zoar, his wife disobeyed the divine command and looked back. This disobedience led to a tragic outcome. She was turned into a pillar of salt, as reported in Genesis 19:26. This transformation symbolizes the punishment and permanent reminder of God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, emphasizing the importance of complete obedience to God's orders. The destruction of the cities was a dramatic event involving fire and brimstone, as God had warned. As described in the Bible, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens, Genesis 19:24. This fire not only destroyed the cities, but also symbolized God's severe condemnation of their wickedness. The complete ruin of Sodom and Gomorrah served as an act of divine justice and a warning to future generations about the severe consequences of sin. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah not only marked the end of these cities, but also serves as a moment for us to reflect on divine justice and holiness. This rigorous judgment shows how serious God is about righteousness and how he deals with sin. The story of these cities is a powerful lesson on divine justice and serves as a warning to all generations about the consequences of sin. The rigor with which God dealt with moral corruption and injustice in these cities demonstrates that he does not tolerate such behaviors. God stated that the outcry against it has grown great, and their sin is very grave, Genesis 18:20, emphasizing the seriousness of the sins committed and his commitment to justice. Being holy, God cannot overlook violations of the principles he has established. An important lesson from this story is the relevance of being righteous and obedient to God. Lot and his family were saved from annihilation thanks to Lot's righteousness and his attention to divine warnings. As recorded, Lot went out, taking with him his 2 daughters and his wife. Genesis 19:15. This rescue demonstrates God's dedication to protecting those who follow his teachings, even during times of severe judgment. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the importance of detaching from worldly temptations. The command given to Lot not to look back is a symbol of breaking away from corrupt and harmful practices. "Do not look back," instructed the Lord, a clear warning to abandon old habits that contributed to the city's ruin. The hesitation and reluctance to leave the condemned city resulted in tragic consequences for his wife, who disobeyed and was turned into a pillar of salt. This detachment is essential for living according to God's will and avoiding repeating the mistakes that caused the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The complete devastation of these cities serves as a continuous reminder that God's justice and holiness are unquestionable and should not be underestimated. The Bible teaches that sin brings inevitable consequences and that God's justice never fails. The stories of Sodom and Gomorrah invite us to reflect and act according to divine principles, showing that these lessons are extremely relevant even today. More than ancient stories, they serve as guides for a life that honors God and avoids injustice. Lot, in deciding to live in Sodom, chose a life of comfort and wealth, but this choice also exposed him to the grave consequences of the prevalent sin in the city. Despite the clear signs of moral decay, he chose to stay, which put him in a difficult situation when the city's destruction approached. This story highlights how our choices can affect not only ourselves, but also those around us. Lot's decisions and the consequent tragedies had a significant impact on his family, reminding us that our actions have far-reaching effects. Therefore, it is vital to seek divine guidance in all our decisions to avoid choices that may have disastrous consequences. After escaping Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his family faced many uncertainties and challenges. They initially took refuge in Zoar, a small town suggested by the angels, which offered greater security compared to the surrounding areas. Despite being a temporary refuge, life in Zoar was not easy for Lot and his daughters. Over time, the continuous fear of future divine judgments led the family to move to the mountains, seeking a safer and more isolated place. In the mountains, Lot and his daughters faced isolation and various difficulties. The simple and remote life imposed significant challenges of survival and adaptation to a new way of life. They found themselves in a vulnerable situation, having to adjust and deal with the realities of a challenging environment. The Bible does not go into much detail about this period, but it makes clear that Lot and his family faced great privations and difficulties while trying to rebuild their lives away from everything they knew. The situation became even more complicated when Lot's daughters, feeling isolated and without hope for the future, made an extreme decision. Believing they were the last people on earth, they decided they needed to preserve their father's lineage. In a moment of desperation, they got Lot drunk and had relations with him, which led to the birth of Moab and Ammon, who later became the progenitors of the Moabite and Ammonite nations. This episode, described in Genesis 19:30-38, shows the severe adversities and drastic choices faced by Lot's family in times of crisis. The story of Lot and his family after leaving Sodom teaches us about the consequences of our choices throughout life. The radical changes in their way of life and the difficulties they faced reflect the complexities of existence and the importance of following God's guidelines. As we reflect on these lessons, we realize the importance of aligning our decisions with the divine will and how this shapes our future. Just as Lot was instructed not to look back and seek safety, we are encouraged to focus on Christ and resist the temptations of the world. The Bible warns us, "Keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come." Matthew 24:42. In times when morality is often questioned by cultural norms, it is essential to reflect on our attitudes and check if we are living according to the principles of justice and holiness. We are called to examine our faith, 2 Corinthians 13:5, and ensure that our actions are in harmony with divine values, avoiding the mistakes that resulted in the fall of great civilizations. Spiritual preparation includes praying, studying the Bible, and living a life of obedience and purity. The Apostle Paul encourages us to always be alert, praying continuously so that we can overcome the challenges that arise and stand firm before the Son of Man, as described in Luke 21:36. Reflecting on these teachings strengthens us to face adversities with wisdom and determination, keeping our lives aligned with God's purposes and vigilant in our faith. Now, write in the comments if you already knew the story of Lot in the Bible. Share this message with more people, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.